right, we're going to try to do this standing up today, see if it works. So after I'm done, and after you're done with me, we will have Monica. At 4 p.m. today, there's going to be a virtual press briefing by the permanent representative of China, Ambassador Zhang Jun. He will speak about the 76th session of the General Assembly. The briefing is organized by the permanent mission of China. You have the connection details. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and that is Thomas Oeha Quintana, who will be here to brief you in this room. And at noon, I will be joined virtually by WFP's Regional Director for Western Africa, Chris Nikoi, who will brief you on the situation in Nigeria. This morning, the Secretary General spoke to council members at the open debate on women, peace, and security and said that women are peace builders, change makers, leaders, and activists, and yet too often they remain on the periphery of formal peace processes and are excluded from rooms where decisions are made. Women's leadership must be the norm, he said. He also noted how women have been impacted by conflict and violence all over the world, and called on Security Council members to support the UN's work to strengthen partnerships with local women leaders, help protect women's rights defenders and activists, and promote women's full and equal meaningful participation in peace processes. And earlier today, the Secretary General visited the In Their Hands, Women Taking Ownership of Peace. The exhibit features works by women photographers and showcases women's work around the world. It's in the east at the delegates entrance. And for those of you, there we go. And for those of you who live in the outer boroughs, it's still being shown in Brooklyn at Photoville Festival until December 1st. Moving on to Afghanistan, the UN Development Program today launched a crisis response initiative that will contribute to preventing a humanitarian catastrophe and the breakdown of Afghanistan's economy. As this is part of the UN's overall response to the situation in the country. The initiative, called Abade, which denotes hope for a better future in local languages, it will channel funding into community activities, including grants to small and micro businesses, especially those owned by women, cash for work projects offering short-term income for the unemployed, and restore local and small infrastructure. It will also support people with disability, the elderly, and the most vulnerable through temporary basic income. All assistance will be provided and delivered to the beneficiaries directly based on impartial assessments carried out in conjunction with local community leaders and independently of authorities. The activities will be funded through contribution to UNDP, as well as through a newly created special trust fund for Afghanistan, which is a UN interagency and multi-partner funding mechanism to enable UN agencies and non-governmental organizations to coordinate their support at the community level. And on the humanitarian side, our colleagues tell us that COVID-19 vaccination campaign in Afghanistan began this week in Kandahar, targeting people in at-risk areas across the province. On November 8th, a polio vaccination campaign will also be carried out alongside the provision of vitamin A in Kandahar. WHO, UNICEF, and other partners are coordinating those efforts. We, along with our partners, continued joint needs assessments throughout Afghanistan to identify humanitarian needs and prioritize immediate assistance. Our humanitarian colleagues also noted that civilians continue to be injured by explosive devices in the country, with incidents reported in Nangarhar and Lakhman areas. The flash appeal for Afghanistan, which is over $606 million ask, is now 45% funded. Turning to another humanitarian crisis, this one in Ethiopia, where the situation in the northern part of the country remains unpredictable and volatile. Our humanitarian colleagues are alarmed by the intensification of conflict, including the airstrikes on Mekelle this week, and reports of growing numbers of people being displaced by recent fighting in Amhara. We once again remind all parties to the conflict of their obligations under international humanitarian law to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. In Tigray, the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate because of the restrictions on the delivery of aid into the region and through the only available route from afar. Between the 13th and 19th of October, we did get 215 trucks carrying humanitarian supplies into Tigray. That's a slight increase from the previous week. Some 1,101 trucks, 1,111 trucks, have entered Tigray since July 12th, which is just 15% of the number of trucks that are needed to enter the area. As you know, we need 100 trucks a day to enter Tigray every day. Fuel has still not been allowed into the province. 14 fuel tankers are currently sitting in Samara in Afar province. Several of our organizations and NGOs have also been forced to reduce or shut down programs due to the depletion or shortages of fuel, cash, and other supplies. Last week, about 52,000 people were reached with food aid, with half of them receiving only 1 or 2 food items. At least 870,000 people on average per week need food assistance. Since early August, our partners have provided food to more than 807,000 people in Amhara and more than 76,000 internally displaced people in Afar. We urgently call on all parties to allow for the unimpeded and sustained access to people in Tigray, Amhara, and Afar. Moving north to Libya, Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, as you know, is continuing her travels in Libya. She spoke today at Libya's International Stabilization Conference, which was taking place in Tripoli. She urged all Libyan parties to exert every effort to hold parliamentary and presidential elections on December 24th, as called for by the Roadmap and Security Council Resolution 2570 and 2571. She urged all member states and regional organizations to consider sending observation teams in coordination with relevant Libyan authorities and institutions to help ensure the credibility of the electoral process and acceptability of the results after the vote. The UN will continue to provide technical assistance for the holding of elections in accordance with our mandate. She also reported that in line with the request by the Libyan authorities and mandate from the Security Council, that the first group of UN monitors to support the Libyan-led ceasefire monitoring mechanisms are arriving today. And the UN Security Council will be embarking on a scheduled trip to Mali and Niger from the 22nd to the 26th of October. That's starting tomorrow. During the trip, Council members will meet various leaders from the two countries as well as civil society. The key objectives are ensuring that the transition in Mali carries on as planned, continuing the conversation on terrorism and climate change effects in the Sahel, as seeing how best the Council can support the region. Two quick notes. The UN Environment Programme today released a report which says that we need to see a drastic reduction in plastic to address the global pollution crisis. The authors are not optimistic about the chances of recycling our way out of the plastic pollution crisis. They warn against damaging alternative to single-use and other plastic products such as bio-based biodegradable plastics, which currently pose a chemical threat similar to conventional plastics. The report calls for the immediate reduction of plastics and encourages a transformation across the whole plastic value chain. Staying on the topic of the environment, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, will be in this room on Tuesday, 9:15 a.m. to launch the UN Environment Programme's Emissions Gap Report. He will be joined virtually by the Executive Director of UNEP, Inger Anderson. Now in its 12th year, the report provides a yearly review on the differences between where greenhouse gases emissions are predicted to be in 2030 and where they should be, to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And there will be a concert at 7 o'clock this evening. The UN Day concert will take place in a hybrid format under the theme Building Back Together for Peace and Prosperity. The Secretary General will deliver remarks and will reiterate the importance of solidarity to overcome the pandemic, conflict, and climate crisis and other challenges the world is confronted with. The concert today, sponsored by the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea, will feature classic music and performances by K-pop stars. Lastly, we thank the 132nd member state to have paid its dues, and that state was the first country to ever host a football World Cup and actually won that World Cup in 1930. Yes, very good, very good. Very good. If you have a question, the floor is yours. Otherwise, we'll go to... Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Steph. I have a question regarding the UN Security Council trip to Sahel region. Is there any more details about this trip, names or?
Sure. I mean, the Kenyan mission, I think, can provide you with the trip. So with the more details, we should be able to get you more as well. Okay, Madame, somebody has a microphone open on the far side. If you could please mute it. Thank you.
It's regarding the Security Council trip to Mali and Niger. Do you think 4 days and you have to take off the long trip is enough to solve the problems or to diffuse the tensions?
Well, I don't, is any time on the ground ever enough? But to me, the way the trip is be framed is not so much about immediately finding a solution, but seeing how the Security Council can better support the region. And I think it's very important that council members have a chance to go on the ground. Edie and then James.
Thank you, Steph. First, how many observers actually arrived in Libya today?
A small group, but I will get you a digit to go with that answer.
Thank you. And on local groups in Haiti have reported that there have been nearly 800 kidnappings reported so far this year. Obviously, this is an issue of concern, growing concern to the outside world also. Has the UN been asked, either the Secretariat or perhaps even Security Council members, to consider sending in any kind of police or other help to try and deal with this growing crisis?
No, short answer, I've not heard any of those reports. We continue to operate under the mandate to support the government, civil society, and also call again on the national authorities to investigate and prosecute the serious crimes. The people most impacted, obviously, the people of Haiti, and we know that this rising crime has an impact on the humanitarian situation. Thousands have been displaced. It makes it more difficult for humanitarian organizations, whether the UN or local NGOs, to operate in such a climate. James?
Okay, I've got a couple of questions, one on Libya, one on Sudan, and one on Ethiopia. On Libya, Rosemary DiCarlo visited to the region, obviously important, but the key aim must have been to unlock the problem of the election, to get the election agreed and on path. How has she fared with that central task?
She, in all her meetings with various interlocutors, has pushed them to continue on that calendar, which was agreed by the Libyan parties, entrenched in Security Council resolutions. She will continue to press to that message. It is up to the Libyan leaders, the Libyan political leaders, to put first and foremost the interests of the Libyan people and ensure the elections do take place on time.
Sudan, Khartoum, there have been 2 rival demonstrations taking place, one supporting the civilian government, one seems to be supporting the military. Pretty tense atmosphere. What's the UN's reaction?
Look, first of all, people have a right to demonstrate freely and peacefully. The UN is committed to supporting the Sudanese transitional authorities in their very important transition to democracy.
Finally, just a quick update from you on Ethiopia. Can you tell us anything more that you've gleaned about the casualties on the ground from the airstrikes this week, from your teams on the ground in Tigray? And also, have you had any of the evidence that was offered by the Ethiopian permanent representative to the Secretary General in terms of written evidence about the explosion?
We have not received any such information from the Ethiopian authorities. I'm sharing with you all the information I have that I get from Michele. Signora.
Thanks, Steph. I have 2 questions. The first is El Salvador yesterday approved a decree that will stop congregations in public or private until the 8th of December, but excludes sports events or concerts, which has put in question the actions by the Congress, motivated by the president's mentions about protests during the past few days in El Salvador. Is any concerns that the pandemic has been used in some occasions to try to control these
I
congregations?
will get you some detailed language on El Salvador, but I think we've been saying for more than a year now that we are concerned that we've seen in various places around the world the pandemic and health regulations being used as an example, as a pretext to clamp down on people's rights to express themselves freely and to express those opinions.
Question on Haiti is yesterday Secretary Blinken met with different ministers in Bogota, Colombia, to talk about migration, and the focus of the conversation was Haiti and the massive amount of migrants coming to the United States and Mexico. Haiti has complained about the fact that they were not included on these conversations. Does the Secretary General think that is a call needed to the region to try to have a regional strategy the same way that Venezuela has done?
It seems difficult to me to understand how you can have a migration policy without involving, as we've been saying for a long time, the countries of origin, the countries of transit, and the countries of destination. James Reinl and then Rick Gladstone.
Hi, Steph. Thanks so much. I've got two questions, a little bit complicated, but there's this report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies about UN aid operations in Syria. The report says that the Assad regime is able to manipulate currency exchange rates. So when you're bringing money into the country for aid work, the regime is able to pocket. Last year, it was 60 million, apparently. I understand what the UN spokesman said in the Guardian article about your guys essentially having your hands tied and needing to get aid to people. I get that position. I'm just wondering, is the methodology of the report right? Is the number 60 million last year dollars? Is that correct?
We have not seen, and our colleagues in Damascus have not seen the copy of the report. We, of course, welcome any sort of independent scrutiny of our operations in any country that we serve, including Syria. As you said, our first and foremost goal is to assist the people in need, no matter where they are and who they are. Our work in Syria, as it is in Ethiopia or anywhere else, is guided by the basic humanitarian principles of accountability, of transparency, efficiency, effectiveness, and impartiality. As for the issue of the currency, most of the UN's procurement for humanitarian response in Syria is made in international and regional markets, and therefore not impacted by the Syrian exchange rates. Otherwise, what we do procure locally, we are required to use the official exchange rate, which is the rule in any country in which we operate. Mr. Gladstone.
Actually, Steph, appreciate that very much. And I did have a second question as well. I hope you don't mind if I go to it. But the BBC has had quite a nice scoop in the run-up to COP26. They've uncovered documents that they say shows that three countries, Saudi Arabia, Japan, and Australia, have been lobbying hard to scale back the ambitions in Glasgow. Does the SG believe this is true? Are Australia, Saudi Arabia, and Japan doing that?
Look, from my reading of the story, my understanding of the story is that this has to do with certain member states trying to make suggestions to the IPCC panel, to scientists. Member states are free to express their opinion, as it is their sovereign right to do so. What is important is that the science remains independent and is based on fact and not politics. Mr. Gladstone.
Thank you very much. Sorry, this is a question a little bit out of left field, and forgive me if it's been addressed recently, but when Colin Powell died a few days ago, I was reminded that the Guernica tapestry that used to hang outside the Security Council had been covered up when he spoke there in 2003. And I've been meaning to ask you, what's going on with that? Is it still, the wall still seems to be bare?
That is a good
some hope that the tapestry can come back?
It's a good observation, Rick. The wall remains bare, it's a good a reminder of me to check of where we are. And the cover-up of the tapestry was not at the request of any member state. It was an idiotic move by a person who's standing at the podium right now. We can talk about that in my book. Benno.
Follow-up to Libya. Can you tell me about the foreign fighters? As of now, how many of the 20,000 still remain in the country?
I think as we've been reporting, we have seen very much a lack of movement on the exit of those people.
So 3 weeks ago, the foreign minister of Libya said there was a very modest start. Can you confirm that actually a few left? Like, are we talking about
I will try.
hundreds?
I don't have those numbers with me, and I'm not sure we're able to report that, but I'll check. Alan?
Thank you, Stéphane. President Putin today proposed to form a list of international threats and the challenges on the level of the UN. He proposes to form it on the level of the UN. Do you have any comment
Sorry,
on
a list of what?
of international challenges and
Right.
threats?
Well, let me look. I had not seen, but I will look. Gregory, did you have a question as well? Or? Oh, okay. All right. As long as you have somebody speaking for you. Ray.
Thank you, Stéphane. Yesterday, there was a meeting in Russia about Afghanistan. Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov said we will not recognize Taliban. Will that affect the meeting of next month in November?
Well,
for credential.
That's a question to ask member states. The Credentials Committee will meet at some point. We'll make a decision. Russia is present on that committee, but from our standpoint, we just have to wait and see. James, and then we'll go to Monica.
Staying with Afghanistan, reportedly the Taliban mayor of Kabul has said that women, and women were still working in the municipality of Kabul, are not to report to work from Saturday onwards. Given the backdrop of the Women, Peace and Security meeting of the Security Council today, all your efforts on women in Afghanistan seem to be going nowhere, in fact, possibly backwards.
Look, we will continue to push for the rights of women to go to work freely, for the rights of girls to be educated, for the rights of young women to be educated. We will continue to do that, and we hope to see movement in the right direction. But we clearly don't control the levers that will make those things happen. Sorry, Iftikhar, you have a question, and then I will go to you, Monica, I promise. Iftikhar, you're muted. Iftikhar, I still can't hear you. Okay. Iftikhar, I'm sorry, I don't...
Hello?
Oh, perfect, go ahead.
Hello, sorry. Sorry, Steph, I just need a clarification. This UNDP initiative for Afghan people, is it separate from the UN funding appeal? United Nations funding appeal?
We're appealing for cash. What UNDP announced is a way for us to spend the cash, to put it simply. Okay.
Okay.
Is this the same thing as the Global Fund thing, or is this a different trust fund?
It's a different trust fund.
There are two now.
Welcome to the UN. Thank you. Monica, all yours.